Welcome to Naked Gardening with Lenny, Lou, and Pop, where we will tell you the naked truth about gardening. Today we're canning tomatoes. You can see over here in the sink that I've got my tomatoes are already washed. I've got water on boiling. We'll show you about skinning out the tomatoes. And we have some tomatoes here that Lenny Lou has already skinned out earlier today. We're in the refrigerator and now they're heating up. I want to start out with a canner first. This is the canner that I use. It's got a gauge on it. I prefer the gauge over the jigglers. I'm just used to it, and that's what I like. I like to be able to watch it. One of the things that you need to do to start with before you start canning is you want to inspect your gasket here, make sure there's no cracks and all. About every third or fourth time canning, you just wipe that with a little bit of vegetable oil. Look at your emergency pop-off here and make sure that everything's good in that and that your steam vent here is clear and is not blocked. Also make sure that you have your weight handy. You'll need your weight. Don't ever lose that thing. I don't know how you would ever replace it for your canner. You'd hate to throw your canner away. Another thing, if you're buying a canner and you're buying one at a yard sale, that's fine, somebody wants to. Make sure that it has the rack for the bottom. If it's just like that, you can't can in it. You can't put your jars directly on the bottom, they will break. So you gotta, I've seen a lot of them for sale and they don't have a rack in the bottom, and you can't buy them. There's no use to them. You can't find a rack for them afterwards. Anyways, so we got our canner, we've inspected it, and for right now it's gonna sit off to the side. I've got water on here boiling. So the first step in canning tomatoes is washing your tomatoes. To be totally honest, okay? We grow tomatoes. We grow a pretty good number of tomatoes, but I like to can all at one time. I mean, I'll take a whole week to can, one after the other. So what we do is there's a local farm that's a tomato farm. We go down there and we buy tomatoes, and we buy like 10 5-gallon buckets at a time. And we picked them this time. They were green as a gourd, or green as poison. They all look just like that. And we laid them out on the floor, on a quilt in the bedroom, and now we have them like this. And another one of the reasons we get them, we like heirloom tomatoes. We like to grow them, and they taste better. But they're not all the same size, and they're all wrinkly and bumpy. And I can go down and buy my tomatoes, and they're all fairly uniform in size, and I get them all at one time, and then we can can them. So they're washed, and the next thing to do is to put them in boiling water, and just drop them in there without sticking your fingers down in the boiling water. They don't have to be in there very long. You're not cooking them, and that's about all I need. There's about 6 or 7 in there, and less than 5 minutes I'll sit here and turn them until I see one of the skins split, and then I'll take them out. These have been in the water for 3 or 4 minutes, and you can see that the skin on it is starting to split. You'll take them out, and I have a sink full of cold water. Sometimes I'll even put ice in the water. And what it does is that hot water on the skin, and the skin is starting to split, it goes into the cold water, causes the skin to contract, and it allows it to slip off easier. It also helps to keep you from burning your fingers so bad when you're slipping the skins off. So I take these out and I put them in the cold water. And the next thing I'm going to do is, just as soon as they're in there, turn around and fill that back up again. Because just as soon as I can get those skins slipped off of these and get them in this pot over here, these ought to be ready. All right, first thing, you need a sharp knife. Lenny Lou fusses at me because I don't keep the knife sharp enough, but I always make sure they have a sharp knife. I cut the core out like that, go with the bucket, and the skin just slips right off. You can hold on to it. And sometimes you're lucky and you just grab it and it all slips out at one time. And as you do that, you look at your tomato and you look for any bad spots in it, which you'll cut out. Just kind of like this. I keep a bucket on the floor It enables me just to drop them all right in there, just to keep on going. So, I got to brag just a little bit, because I'm over here canning tomatoes and getting ready to can tomatoes, and Lenny Lou is videotaping me, but let me show you what she's doing. She's over here cutting up vegetables and going to make a vegetable and sausage casserole. And because you got to eat this stuff sometime, so it all doesn't get canned. It gets cut up and cooked. And this is she roasted some vegetables the other day, and we thought it'd be really nice to put some sausage in with it and roast it in a big pan. All right, I've got all my tomatoes skinned over here and ready. I've got some of my jars packed. I have my lids in some boiling water up there to soften the seal material on it. And then I just pack my tomatoes in here. And some of them get too big to squeeze down through the funnel. I just squirt tomato juice all over the front of me. Just cut them up, stuff them in there. It's called packing food for a reason. You're packing it down in there. And what I will do is after I get my jars all full, I've got a plastic chopstick that I run down in there and get the air pockets out of there, the air bubbles out of there, because you don't want those in there. And it says to leave a 1/2 inch of head space on the top, and that's just about to the bottom of the neck right there. So I just take the chopstick and I push down around the edges, and it just gets all the air bubbles out. Lets them come to the top where they can get out of the jar. Because when you're canning, when it pulls the steam comes out the stem, it's pulling all the air out of it. Because if you've got air in there, it'll rot. Now, I always have a little book open, even though I can all the time, and I know what it's going to be, but I always have my little book open just to be sure. But you got to add a teaspoon of salt to each one. Remember, salt is not just for flavor, salt is also a preservative. So we're adding a teaspoon of salt to each one of these, just like this. And it's not like baking. You don't have to be absolutely exact with the amount of salt. Next thing you have to do is you'll have to wipe off the top of the jar. Now I washed these jars and then I put them in the microwave. I do it for 6 minutes just because it gets them hot, and it also kills any bacteria in them after you've washed them. And one of the things you always do is inspect this rim on the top of your jar to make sure there's no nicks or chips out of it. If there is, just throw it away. And the next thing we do, I got my canner. I've got 2 quarts of water in my canner. Always 2 quarts of water, and that's what's going to make your steam in there. I'll go ahead and turn it on low now. I've got my lids back here. They're boiled. Count your lids. Make sure you got 7, because it's often easy to get 2 lids stuck together, and if you haven't counted to be sure, you say, well, did I have 7 or did I miss it and have 6? So you put your lids on, you put your rings on, and I use this little magnet to pull them out. It makes it real easy. Pull them out of the water. So when you put your lids on, or your rings on, just put them on, just tighten them a little bit. Don't crank down on them hard. You don't have to. Just kind of finger tight. Take my magnet and I pull it out, reach down here and grab a ring. These jars are hot. The tomatoes are not really, because we haven't cooked them. All we did is heated them up and slipped the skins on them. Tomatoes are going to can for 5 pounds for 10 minutes. All right, I got my jars in here. My lids are all on there right, and I've got my heat. I'll go ahead and right now turn my heat all the way up to high and put my lid on it. Now, we're gonna let it go until you get steam out this back valve here. Your safety valve will pop up, and then the steam will start coming out here, and it'll come out. When you get a steady stream of steam, say that fast, a steady stream of steam coming out of there, then you know that you've got all the air out of your jars and all the air out of your canner. It's all steam coming out. And then you'll put your weight on it then and build up your pressure. And we'll see that in just a minute. So we got a solid stream of steam. Sometimes you gotta look way up here to see it, but it's coming out, and then you'll see little puffs here, but there's a solid stream coming out there. My safety valve is up. That's the first thing that popped up, and then we get a solid stream. And now I put my weight on like that. Keep my heat turned up on high, and I'm going to go come back over here and check my thing. It says process 10 minutes at 5 pounds for whole tomatoes. Now I can probably go down to quartered tomatoes because that's mostly what I did, or crushed them a little bit, which is 8 minutes at 5 pounds. So anyways, when it gets up to 5 pounds, on the needle right here, will be right here. Gets up to 5 pounds, I'll set my timer, and I'll time it for 10 minutes, and then it'll be done. Now, tomatoes go really quick, so because I don't have a whole lot of pressure on there, so when it gets done, I'll pick it up and I'll set it off to the side here. I need to go ahead right now start loading up my jars for my next canning, because that pressure is going to drop fast. And then when it's dropped and your little safety valve falls down smooth, then I know my pressure's gone. I can pull my weight off and I can take my jars out. Every time I take my jars out, I dump the water in there and rinse out the canner. I've tried to use that same water over and over again. The water's too hot. I put the jars down in there, it'll pop the bottoms out of it. I've learned that from experience. You lose too many jars that way. So I dump it out and I start fresh every time. It doesn't take long with a good stove to heat it right back up again. You notice here that my safety valve is down. See, this is what it looks like when it's up and it's down, so there's no pressure left in there. So now I can safely take off my weight. Now remember, if you touch this canner, now you're gonna burn yourself. It's hot. I mean, if you just bump it, you're burning. So the water coming out of here is also extremely hot. So turn it away from you, grip it off, and then find some place to go set it down. And then you'll get a jar lifter. It's very important. It's curved like this to go around the top of your jars. And you bring them out. Not a pretty jar of tomatoes. Now, one of the things I do is I set it on this towel back here, and I'll cover it up with the towel, because the jars are hot enough that if you get a cool breeze to blow over top of them, your jar will bust. And Lenny Lou right now is standing on top of an air conditioner vent, and but if that air conditioner vent was to blow on these jars, it would pop the jars, and you'd lose that can of tomatoes. So, or anything you're canning, you don't want the cool breeze. So I set them off like that, and I'll cover them up with this, and I'll put in another load of jars in, another load of tomatoes, and do it again and do it again until I'm finished. And then they'll sit overnight, and then tomorrow when we take them and put them on the racks where we store them, I take the rings off, and then use the rings over and over again. Only can use the lids one time. You throw those away. There is a company that makes reusable lids. I have not tried them. I'd like to give them a shot sometime. But these lids here is a one-time use. You throw them away. The rings you use over and over again. Once it's sealed, it's sealed. Take the ring off. Use it again next time. I always put the year that the tomatoes were done. So I'll put 20 on these here. So I'll know when they were done. And we'll have some that are 2 or 3 years old a lot of times. And I always use my oldest ones first and then rotate my stock. I hope you've enjoyed our video on canning tomatoes. Y'all have at it. I mean, just go ahead and give it a try. Canners are not that expensive. Buying jars, the first couple times it gets a little expensive buying jars and all, but you can reuse your jars year after year. And just when you give somebody a jar of tomatoes or a jar of beans or something, tell them to bring your jar back. Hope y'all enjoyed canning with Lenny Lou and Pop on naked gardening, the naked truth about gardening and canning and all things garden.